The sun hadn't even peeked over the busted-up skyline of what used to be Nashville when Marcus Williams knew they were totally screwed. He crouched behind a flipped-over delivery truck, his beat-up hunting rifle pressed against his chest, trying like hell to keep his breathing quiet while his heart hammered away like a jackhammer on concrete. The street ahead looked like something straight out of a nightmare, abandoned cars sitting every which way, broken glass sparkling on the asphalt like deadly confetti, and bodies. Man, there were bodies everywhere, though Marcus tried real hard not to think about whether they were gonna stay down or get back up for round two. "Yo, Marcus, we gotta bounce, like right now," whispered Jamie Rodriguez from somewhere behind him, her voice tight with the kind of fear that makes your stomach drop. She was pressed up against the truck's undercarriage, her dark eyes scanning the ruins of what used to be Broadway, where tourists used to stumble around drunk and happy. Those days were deader than disco now. "I'm counting at least 20 of those freaks between us and the safe house, and that ain't even including whatever's lurking in those buildings." Marcus didn't need to look back to know Jamie was right. She'd always had crazy good instincts, even before the world went sideways and turned into this hellscape. 3 weeks ago, she'd been slinging drinks at a honky-tonk bar, flashing that megawatt smile at tourists for tips. Now she was running for her life with the rest of them, that same smile long gone, replaced by a hard edge that made her look way older than 24. "I see him," Marcus muttered, adjusting his grip on the rifle. He was running low on ammo, down to maybe 15 rounds, which was basically nothing when you were talking about the undead. You couldn't just wing one of these bastards and call it a day. Headshots only, and even then, sometimes they kept twitching and crawling toward you like broken toys that wouldn't quit. We wait for Tommy's signal. He's got the distraction ready, so we stick to the plan. The plan. That's what they called it, anyway, though calling it a plan was being pretty generous. More like a Hail Mary wrapped in duct tape and desperation. Scratch that, Tommy Bradford, the former Army mechanic who'd somehow survived the initial outbreak by hiding in an auto shop for 4 days straight, was supposed to rig up some kind of noise trap 2 blocks east. The idea was simple enough: loud noise equals zombie dinner bell, zombies shuffle off to investigate, and the rest of them haul ass to the safe house while the coast was clear. Simple, sure, but simple had a nasty habit of going sideways real quick these days. Crouched next to Jamie was Kyle Peterson, all 6'3" of former college basketball star turned apocalypse survivor. The dude was shaking like a leaf, his expensive sneakers, probably the last clean pair in the whole damn city, tapping out a nervous rhythm on the pavement. "Man, I can't do this," Kyle whispered, his voice cracking. "I can't do this again. Did you see what they did to Rachel? Did you see?" "Shut it, Kyle," Marcus snapped, harder than he meant to, but they couldn't afford to lose it right now. Rachel had been Kyle's girlfriend, and yeah, what happened to her had been beyond messed up, but dwelling on it would get them all killed. "You wanna honor Rachel? You stay quiet and you stay alive. That's what she'd want, brother." Kyle's jaw clenched, but he nodded, swallowing down whatever was threatening to spill out. The kid had heart, they all did, or they wouldn't have made it this far. 6 days since the outbreak started, since the news stopped making sense and the emergency broadcasts turned into screaming, then static, then nothing. 6 days since the dead decided to get up and start shopping for human takeout. 6 days of running, hiding, and watching people they knew turn into monsters. Marcus risked a peek around the truck's twisted metal frame. The zombies, or geeks as Tommy called them, or rotters like Jamie preferred, were doing their usual thing, which was basically shambling around like drunk toddlers looking for their next meal. They weren't the sprinting, screaming types from the movies, thank God. These freaks were slow, clumsy even, but what they lacked in speed they made up for in pure determination and numbers. And that smell, man, that unholy stench of rotting meat and something chemical that burned your nostrils. You never got used to that smell. He spotted one up close, maybe 30 feet away, and his stomach lurched. It used to be a woman, probably somebody's mom or sister, wearing a torn-up floral dress that might have been pretty once. Half her face was gone, just ragged meat and exposed bone, and her arms reached out in that awful, jerky way they all had, like broken marionettes. Her jaw worked up and down, teeth clicking together, hungry for something she'd never really eat, 'cause these things didn't actually eat you, they just bit you, infected you, and moved on to the next poor soul. "Where the hell is Tommy?" Jamie hissed, checking her watch. "He was supposed to light this party up 3 minutes ago." Marcus felt that familiar knot of worry tightening in his gut. Tommy was solid, probably the most reliable person in their ragtag group of survivors, but reliable didn't mean immortal. Anything could have happened. Maybe he ran into a pack of geeks. Maybe the trap didn't work. Maybe he turned tail and ran, though Marcus didn't believe that for a second. Tommy wasn't the running type. Then, like an answer to a prayer nobody dared to pray, the sound hit them, a massive, echoing crash followed by what sounded like every car alarm in a 3-block radius going off at once. The cacophony split the early morning quiet like a chainsaw through butter, and Marcus couldn't help the grin that cracked across his face. That crazy son of a gun actually pulled it off. The effect on the zombies was immediate and kinda beautiful in a twisted way. Every single rotter and eye shot suddenly jerked toward the sound, their dead eyes focusing on something they couldn't quite understand but definitely wanted to investigate. As one massive, groaning horde, they started shuffling east, drawn to the noise like moths to a flame. Even the floral dress lady turned away, her clicking jaw pointing toward Tommy's distraction. "That's our cue, folks," Marcus said, already moving. "Stay low, stay quiet, and for the love of all that's holy, stay close. We lose each other in this mess, and we're done." They moved out from behind the truck in a tight group, Marcus taking point with Jamie right behind him and Kyle bringing up the rear. The safe house was supposed to be 6 blocks north, tucked into what used to be a converted warehouse that some preppers had set up before everything went to hell. According to the radio chatter they'd picked up 2 days ago, the last broadcast they'd heard from anyone, the place had reinforced doors, supplies, and actual living people who weren't trying to eat your face. It sounded like heaven, or at least as close to heaven as you could get when hell had moved in next door. The first block went smooth, almost too smooth. They stuck to the shadows, moving between abandoned cars and piles of trash that hadn't been picked up in what felt like forever. Nashville had turned into a ghost town, and not the fun kind with tourists and souvenir shops. This was the real deal: broken windows, dried blood on the sidewalks, personal belongings scattered everywhere like nobody was coming back for them, which they probably weren't. Marcus spotted a kid's teddy bear lying in a gutter, one of its button eyes missing, and he forced himself to look away. Couldn't think about that stuff. Couldn't think about the families who didn't make it, the kids who'd never grow up, the dreams that died when the infection spread. You start thinking like that, and you might as well just lie down and wait for the geeks to find you. They were halfway through block 2 when things got hairy. A door to their left suddenly burst open, and a man came stumbling out, an actual living, breathing man, not a zombie. He was covered in blood, his shirt torn to shreds, and his eyes had that wild, panicked look of someone who'd seen way too much. "Help!" he screamed, which was basically the worst thing you could do in a city full of the undead. "Please, God, somebody help me. They're right behind me, there." He didn't get to finish. 3 zombies crashed through the doorway after him, moving with that awful single-minded purpose. The fastest one, wearing the tattered remains of a security guard uniform, grabbed the man's shoulder and pulled him backward. The man's scream hit a pitch that Marcus would probably hear in his nightmares forever. "We gotta help him." Kyle started forward, but Jamie grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in hard. "We can't," she said, and man, the pain in her voice was something fierce. "We go in there, we're dead too. There's too many." Kyle looked like he wanted to argue, looked like he wanted to be the hero, but the man's screams cut off with a wet, gurgling sound that made the decision for them. Marcus pulled them both into a recessed doorway as more zombies started appearing, drawn by the commotion. They pressed themselves into the shadows, barely breathing, as what looked like a dozen rotters shuffled past, all heading toward the fresh kill. "This is so messed up," Kyle whispered, and there were tears running down his face. "We just let him die. We survived," Marcus said flatly, though it felt like swallowing broken glass. "That's all we can do, man. Survive and keep moving." They waited until the last zombie passed, then bolted, running now because stealth had gone out the window. The safe house was close, had to be close, and Marcus's lungs were burning by the time they rounded the corner onto what used to be Fifth Avenue. The warehouse stood at the end of the street, and it looked exactly like it had been described, 3 stories of red brick with steel shutters over the windows and a reinforced door that looked like it could stop a tank. But between them and salvation stood a problem. A big, groaning, undead problem. At least 40 zombies clogged the street, forming a wall of rotting flesh between the survivors and safety. They weren't moving much, just kind of milling around like they were waiting for something, but there were too many to sneak past and way too many to fight through. "Oh, come on!" Jamie practically shouted, frustration boiling over. "Are you kidding me right now? We get this close in." A sharp whistle cut her off. Marcus's head snapped up, searching for the source, and spotted a figure on the warehouse roof, waving their arms. It was hard to make out details from this distance, but the person seemed to be pointing at something, gesturing frantically. "They're trying to tell us something," Marcus said, squinting against the rising sun. The figure kept pointing west, toward a narrow alley that ran between 2 buildings. Then they made a climbing motion with their hands. "Fire escape," Kyle said suddenly, his basketball player height giving him a better view. "There's a fire escape in that alley. They want us to climb up and cross over on the rooftops." It wasn't the worst idea Marcus had ever heard, which was saying something considering the week they'd had. "All right, new plan. We hit that alley, climb up, and pray those old fire escapes hold our weight. Everybody good with that?" Nobody looked good with it, but nobody had a better suggestion either. They moved toward the alley, keeping low and quiet, which was getting harder as more zombies started appearing from side streets. Tommy's distraction must have worn off, and now the geeks were spreading back out, hunting for fresh meat. The alley was narrow and dark, smelling like piss and old garbage, which was actually a step up from the zombie stench. The fire escape clung to the building's side like rusty skeleton, and Marcus sent up a silent prayer that it wouldn't collapse the second they put weight on it. He went first, testing each step, listening to the metal groan and creak under his boots. "It's holding," he called down softly. "Come on up, but spread out. Don't put too much weight in one spot." Jamie came next, moving fast and fearless despite the sketchy metal beneath her feet. Kyle followed, and Marcus could hear him muttering what sounded like prayers under his breath. They climbed past the first floor, then the second, and Marcus was starting to think they might actually make it when Kyle's foot went through a rusted-out step with a sound like a shotgun blast. "No, no, no!" Kyle yelped, his leg stuck through the hole up to his knee. He yanked hard, panicking, and the whole fire escape shuddered. "Stop moving!" Marcus barked, climbing back down toward him. "You're gonna bring the whole thing down." But it was too late. Kyle's thrashing had weakened the already sketchy structure, and with a sound like the world's worst zipper, a section of the fire escape tore away from the building. Marcus grabbed Jamie and pressed them both against the wall as metal screamed and Kyle went down hard, crashing onto the second-floor platform with a thud that had to hurt. "Kyle!" Jamie shouted, forgetting about stealth in her panic. I'm okay," Kyle groaned, pulling himself up. Blood was running from a gash on his forehead, but he was moving, which was the important thing. Not so important was the fact that every zombie in a 2-block radius had definitely heard that and was now converging on their position. Marcus could hear them, that awful chorus of moans and shuffling feet, getting closer by the second. Climb. Now. Marcus pushed Jamie ahead of him, and they scrambled up the remaining floors, the fire escape swaying and creaking with every step. Kyle limped behind them, favoring his leg but moving as fast as he could. They burst onto the roof, and Marcus immediately spotted the figure who'd signaled them, a woman, maybe 35, with close-cropped blonde hair and a crossbow slung across her back. She was already moving toward them, waving them forward. "This way," she shouted, her voice carrying a thick southern accent. "We got a bridge set up to the next building. Move your butts." The bridge turned out to be a couple of 2x4s laid across the gap between buildings, which was maybe 6 feet wide but looked like the Grand Canyon when you were standing on the edge. The woman crossed first, walking it like a tightrope, making it look easy. "Y'all coming or what?" she called from the other side. "Them geeks can climb, you know. Slow, but they can do it." Jamie went next, arms out for balance, and made it across without incident. Kyle looked at the gap, looked back at the fire escape where the first zombie head was just appearing, and took a deep breath. "Please don't let me die," he muttered, then stepped out onto the board. He was halfway across when his injured leg buckled. For one heart-stopping second, Marcus thought he was going to fall, but Kyle caught himself, windmilling his arms and somehow staying on the board. He scrambled the rest of the way across and collapsed on the other roof, breathing hard. Marcus took one last look at the fire escape, where at least a dozen zombies were now climbing, their movements jerky but determined. Then he stepped onto the board and crossed, not letting himself think about the drop, about what would happen if he fell. 10 seconds later, he was on the other side, and the blonde woman was already pulling the boards across, sending them clattering down into the alley below. "Welcome to the last stand," she said with a grim smile, extending her hand. "Name's Dakota Mitchell. Hope y'all brought something useful to the party, 'cause we're running short on just about everything." Marcus shook her hand, taking in the setup on this roof. There were at least a dozen people up here, most of them armed with whatever they could find, baseball bats, kitchen knives, a few guns. They'd built a shelter out of tarps and old furniture, and someone had set up a rain collection system using trash cans and plastic sheeting. "Marcus Williams," he said, then gestured to the others. "That's Jamie Rodriguez and Kyle Peterson. We heard your broadcast about the safe house?" Dakota's expression shifted, something sad passing over her features. "Yeah, about that. Safe house got overrun yesterday. We lost a lot of good folks. This is what's left, 14 of us, holding out on these rooftops and praying for a miracle." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. They'd come all this way, lost Rachel and that guy in the street and God knows how many others, and for what? A rooftop with no escape route and 14 scared survivors? "So what's the plan?" Jamie asked, her voice tight. "We just camp up here until we starve or they figure out how to climb better." "The plan," said a new voice, "is we hold out until the convoy arrives." Marcus turned to see a man emerging from the tarp shelter, tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and the kind of posture that screamed military. He carried himself with authority, and the others seemed to defer to him automatically. "Major Brett Harrison, Army Reserve," the man said, offering a crisp nod. "We've been in radio contact with a military convoy heading north from Alabama. They're establishing a safe zone in Louisville, evacuating survivors as they go. ETA is 48 hours, give or take." 48 hours, Kyle repeated, slumping against the roof ledge. "We just gotta survive 48 more hours." Harrison's expression was grim but determined. "That's the mission, son. We've got limited supplies, limited ammo, and a whole city full of hostiles between us and rescue. But we've also got high ground, defensible positions, and most importantly, we've got each other. We work together, we watch each other's backs, and we make it through this. That's not a suggestion, that's an order." Marcus found himself nodding, feeling something he hadn't felt in days, hope. It was a fragile, dangerous thing, hope, but it was better than nothing. He looked around at the faces of the other survivors, a teenage kid who couldn't have been older than 16, an elderly man with kind eyes and shaking hands, a woman holding a baseball bat like it was a lifeline, and others, all looking scared and exhausted but alive. "All right," Marcus said, checking his rifle. "What do you need us to do?" "The next 48 hours, Harrison explained, were all about rationing and rotation. They had enough food for maybe 2 days if they were careful, and water was the rain collection and whatever bottles people had carried with them. Ammunition was the real problem. Collectively, they had maybe 200 rounds for various firearms, which sounded like a lot until you did the math on how many zombies were shambling around Nashville. Harrison had set up a watch rotation, with armed guards posted at the roof access points at all times. The zombies could climb, but they were slow and clumsy, making them easy targets as they struggled up fire escapes and drainage pipes. The real danger was exhaustion, people falling asleep on watch, making mistakes, letting their guard down for just a second. Marcus took the first watch shift with Dakota, positioned at the eastern edge of the roof cluster. They'd actually set up on 4 connected buildings, using more makeshift bridges and in one case, a conveniently placed dumpster that let them hop from one roof to another. It gave them space to spread out in multiple escape routes, which Harrison insisted was crucial. "So," Dakota said, scanning the street below with practiced eyes, "what did you do before the world ended? You got that look about you, steady hands, good with a gun. Cop? Military?" Marcus shook his head. "Electrician. Union guy, worked on commercial buildings mostly. The rifle's my granddad's. He taught me to shoot when I was a kid, took me hunting a few times. Never thought I'd be using those skills like this, though." "Nobody did," Dakota agreed. She notched a bolt in her crossbow and aimed at a zombie that had started climbing the fire escape. The bolt took it right through the eye socket, and the corpse dropped like a puppet with cut strings. "I was a park ranger before this. Spent my days telling tourists not to feed the bears and making sure hikers didn't get lost. Now I'm shooting my neighbors in the head. Funny how life works out." There was no humor in her voice, just a bone-deep weariness that Marcus understood completely. They'd all lost their old lives, their old selves. The question was whether they'd survive long enough to build new ones. The sun climbed higher, turning the rooftop into an oven. Below, the city groaned and shuffled, thousands of zombies wandering the streets in an endless search for prey. Marcus tried not to think about the fact that each one of those monsters used to be a person, someone with a name, a family, dreams about tomorrow. Now they were just targets, threats to be eliminated. Around noon, the teenage kid, his name was Cody Barnes, and he'd survived by hiding in his school's boiler room, came around with water rations. Each person got 1 cup, barely enough to wet your throat, and Marcus forced himself to drink it slowly, making it last. "Mr. Harrison says we need to gather anything useful from the buildings," Cody explained, his voice cracking with youth and stress. "Like, we can break into the apartments below us, grab food, water, weapons, whatever. But it's risky 'cause we don't know if any of them geeks got trapped inside." "I'll go," Marcus said immediately. Sitting around waiting made him twitchy, and at least scavenging was productive. Dakota nodded. "I'll back you up. Cody, get Jamie and tell her we're going in. I want her watching the exit in case we need to bail fast." They assembled a team, Marcus, Dakota, Jamie, and a quiet guy named Owen Fletcher who'd been a locksmith before the outbreak. If there were locked doors, Owen could get them through. Harrison approved the mission but gave them strict instructions: 30 minutes max, don't take unnecessary risks, and at the first sign of serious trouble, abort and get back to the roof. The building they chose was the one they were currently on, a old apartment complex that had seen better days even before the apocalypse. Owen got them through the roof access door in about 20 seconds, and they descended into darkness, flashlights cutting through the gloom. The stairwell smelled stale and musty but thankfully not like death. They moved down to the 3rd floor, weapons ready, every nerve on high alert. The hallway stretched out before them, doors on either side, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the shadows. "We hit apartments systematically," Dakota whispered. "Quick in and out, grab anything useful, don't get greedy." The first apartment was unlocked, which was never a good sign. Marcus pushed the door open slowly, and the smell hit him immediately, rot and copper and human waste. There was a body in the living room, an older man who'd clearly been dead for days. He hadn't turned, which meant he'd either died of natural causes right when everything went crazy, or someone had put him down properly with a bullet to the brain. They searched quickly, finding 2 cans of soup, a bottle of aspirin, and a full gallon of water in the fridge. Score. The second apartment yielded similar results, basic supplies and thankfully no zombies. They were starting to think this would be a clean sweep when they reached apartment 3F. Owen had just picked the lock when they heard it, a low, wet groaning from inside. Marcus and Dakota exchanged looks. Zombie, definitely, but it sounded like just one. They could handle one. Marcus pushed the door open, rifle raised, and immediately wished he hadn't. The apartment was a slaughterhouse. Blood covered every surface, and body parts were scattered around like some kind of sick jigsaw puzzle. In the middle of it all stood a zombie, a fresh one, newly turned, still wearing a business suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the woman handcuffed to the radiator in the corner, very much alive, staring at them with eyes that had gone somewhere far away. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please kill me. I'm bit. I'm bit and I don't want to turn into one of them. Please." Marcus's blood ran cold. She was right, he could see the bite on her arm, angry and infected, the skin around it already starting to discolor. She had maybe a few hours before the fever took her, before she became one of the monsters. "Who handcuffed you?" Jamie asked, her voice shaking. The woman's laugh was broken, terrible. "My husband. He said he couldn't do it, couldn't put me down, but he couldn't watch me turn either. So he cuffed me here and left. Just left me." Dakota raised her crossbow, aiming at the business suit zombie, and put it down with a clean shot. Then she turned to the woman, and Marcus saw her hand tremble as she loaded another bolt. "What's your name, honey?" Dakota asked softly. "Melissa. Melissa Hoffman." "Okay, Melissa. I'm real sorry this happened to you. You got any last words? Anybody you want us to tell if we find them?" Melissa closed her eyes. "Tell my daughter Emma that I love her. Tell her I was brave at the end. Please. Don't let her think I was scared." "You got it," Dakota promised, and Marcus saw tears running down her cheeks. "You're real brave, Melissa. You're a fighter." The crossbow bolt was quick and clean, and Melissa Hoffman slumped forward, freed from a fate worse than death. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Jamie's quiet sobbing. "We gotta go," Owen said, his voice tight. "We gotta go right now." They stumbled out of the apartment, loaded down with supplies but carrying something heavier, another piece of trauma, another nightmare for the collection. Marcus wanted to throw up, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything but keep moving, but that wasn't an option. You kept moving, or you died. Those were the only choices. They made it back to the roof without incident, though Marcus felt like he was operating on autopilot. Harrison took one look at their faces and didn't ask questions, just directed them to drop off the supplies and take a break. Marcus found a quiet corner and sat down hard, his hands shaking. Jamie joined him, still crying, and they sat together in silence, processing horrors that no words could adequately describe. "I can't do this," Jamie finally said. "Marcus, I can't keep doing this. Every day it's something worse. That woman, Rachel, that guy in the street, how many more people are we gonna watch die?" "As many as it takes until we don't," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. 48 hours, Jamie. We just gotta hang on for 48 more hours. But 48 hours felt like forever when every minute was a battle against despair. The rest of the day passed in a blur of watch rotations and rationing. The supplies they'd gathered helped, but Harrison was clear that they were still running on fumes. The evening brought cooler temperatures but no relief from the stress. Below, the zombie population seemed to be growing, with more and more rotters filling the streets. They're hurting, Harrison explained during a group meeting as the sun set. We've seen this behavior before, during the initial outbreak. They gravitate toward noise, toward signs of life. They know we're up here, maybe they can't figure out how to get to us efficiently, but they know. So we stay quiet, we stay vigilant, and we don't give them any reason to try harder. That night, Marcus took the midnight watch with Kyle, who'd been quiet since the fire escape incident. The kid was hurting, physically and emotionally, and Marcus wished he had some wisdom to share, some magic words that would make it better. "You did good today," Marcus finally said. "Getting across that gap with a busted leg, that took guts." Kyle stared out at the dark city, lights out everywhere except for a few fires burning in the distance. "Rachel used to say I was brave. Back when we were in college, I got mugged one time, and I fought back instead of just handing over my wallet. Got a black eye and a broken rib, but I kept my stuff." She said I was the bravest person she knew. He wiped his eyes roughly. "I don't feel brave now. I feel like I'm one bad scare away from losing it completely." "Bravery ain't about not being scared," Marcus said. "It's about being scared out of your mind and doing what needs doing anyway. You're still here, still fighting. That's brave, brother." They lapsed into silence, watching the darkness, listening to the moans of the dead below. Marcus found himself thinking about his own family, his mom in Florida, his sister in California. Were they alive? Had they made it to safety, or had they become part of the shambling hordes? He didn't let himself dwell on it. Couldn't afford to. The attack came at 3 a.m, during that dead hour when humans are at their lowest ebb. Marcus heard it before he saw it, a scraping, shuffling sound coming from the western fire escape. He turned, bringing his rifle up, and his heart dropped. At least 20 zombies were climbing up, moving in a coordinated way that he hadn't seen before. It was like they'd figured something out, learned that persistence paid off. And they just kept coming, an endless stream of rotting bodies pulling themselves up the metal framework. "We got incoming!" Marcus shouted, firing at the lead zombie. Headshot, clean kill, but another one just climbed over the corpse. West side, multiple hostiles. The roof exploded into chaos. Harrison appeared with a hunting rifle, barking orders, getting people into position. Dakota started launching crossbow bolts, each one finding a target. Jamie had a pistol, making her shots count, while others grabbed melee weapons, preparing for close combat if the zombies made it over the edge. For 10 minutes that felt like hours, they fought a desperate battle, dropping zombies as fast as they could climb. Marcus's rifle clicked empty, and he drew the hunting knife from his belt, preparing for the worst. But slowly, gradually, the tide turned. The pile of corpses on the fire escape grew large enough to block the path, and the zombies, lacking the intelligence to find another route, just kept trying to climb over their fallen comrades and getting picked off. When the last one dropped, the silence was almost painful. Marcus's ears rang from gunfire, and his hands shook from adrenaline. He did a quick head count and felt relief wash over him. Nobody lost, though Owen had a nasty bite on his arm. No, wait, not a bite. Just a cut from some sharp metal. Close call. "Ammo count," Harrison ordered, and the numbers that came back weren't good. They'd burned through almost a third of their remaining ammunition. At this rate, they'd be dry long before the convoy arrived. "We need a new strategy," Dakota said, reloading her crossbow. "We can't afford another fight like that." Harrison nodded grimly. "Agreed. From here on out, we're melee only unless absolutely necessary. Conserve every single bullet. And we need to reinforce these access points, make it harder for them to climb. Use furniture, debris, whatever we can find." They spent the pre-dawn hours building barricades, piling junk on the fire escapes and roof access points. It was exhausting work, but it beat sitting around waiting to die. By the time the sun came up, they'd created a maze of obstacles that would slow down any future zombie climbs. Marcus collapsed into an exhausted sleep around 7 a.m., with Jamie watching over him. His dreams were predictably awful, rotting faces and reaching hands and Melissa Hoffman's voice asking him to please kill her. He woke up 4 hours later feeling worse than when he'd laid down, but that was becoming normal. "About time you rejoined the living," said a cheerful voice. Marcus cracked his eyes open to see an older African-American woman smiling down at him. He recognized her from the group but hadn't caught her name yet. "Ms. Loretta Jackson," she introduced herself, offering him a cup of water. "Used to run a diner down on 4th Street. Best biscuits and gravy in Nashville, if I do say so myself. Which I do, frequently and without shame." Despite everything, Marcus smiled. "Marcus Williams. Thanks for the water. We got to look out for each other, baby," Loretta said, settling down next to him with a grunt. "World's gone crazy, but that don't mean we have to. I've been through some hard times in my 67 years, riots, floods, losing my husband to cancer, and I learned that people are what matter. Long as we got each other, we got hope." It was a nice sentiment, and Marcus wanted to believe it, but hope felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. Still, Loretta's presence was comforting, maternal in a way that made him ache for his own mom. The second day on the rooftop was somehow worse than the first. The heat was oppressive, turning their makeshift shelter into an oven. Water rations were cut to half a cup per person, barely enough to survive. Hunger gnawed at Marcus's belly, but the food situation was even more critical than water. They were down to scraps, rationing out crackers and canned goods that wouldn't last another day. "Convoy better show up on time," Kyle muttered, gnawing on a single saltine cracker like it was a steak dinner. "I'm so hungry I'd eat one of them geeks if somebody cooked it right." "Don't even joke about that," Jamie said, but her smile was strained. She'd lost weight, they all had, and her eyes had dark circles that makeup couldn't fix, not that anyone had makeup anymore. The afternoon brought new problems. One of the survivors, a middle-aged man named Derek Walsh, started showing signs of heat stroke, confusion, nausea, flushed skin. They got him into the shade and tried to cool him down with their precious water, but it was touch and go for a while. "We're falling apart," Owen said quietly to Marcus during their watch shift. "Even if the convoy shows up, I don't know if we'll be in any shape to make it to them." Marcus wanted to argue but couldn't. Owen was right. They were dehydrated, starving, exhausted, and low on everything that mattered. The zombies below seemed endless, and their defenses were literally held together with duct tape and prayers. But then, just as the sun started setting on their second day, they heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the dead city. The distant thump-thump-thump of helicopter blades. Everyone scrambled to their feet, searching the sky, and there it was, a military Black Hawk, flying low over the city. Harrison immediately grabbed a flare gun they'd been saving and fired it into the air. The bright red flare arced up, screaming, "We're here, we're alive, please don't leave us." The helicopter banked, circling back, and Marcus felt hope surge in his chest like a living thing. A voice crackled over Harrison's radio, which they'd been monitoring constantly. "This is Rescue Bird Alpha 6 to survivors on the rooftops. We have visual on your position. Be advised, primary convoy is still 12 hours out, but we're dropping emergency supplies. Clear an LZ and pop smoke if you can." Harrison was already moving, directing people to clear the largest roof section. Dakota lit a smoke grenade, orange smoke billowing up, and the helicopter came in low and fast. A crate dropped from its belly, parachute deploying, and landed right in the middle of their makeshift landing zone. The helicopter crew gave them a thumbs up and pulled away, heading back toward whatever base they'd come from. The survivors descended on the crate like it was Christmas morning, prying it open to reveal MREs, water bottles, ammunition, medical supplies, and, God bless whoever packed this thing, a radio with fresh batteries. "We're gonna make it," Jamie said, tears streaming down her face as she hugged a bottle of water like it was a newborn baby. "We're actually gonna make it." That night, with full bellies for the first time in days and enough ammunition to hold off an army of the dead, the mood on the rooftop shifted. People started talking about the future, about what they'd do when they reached the safe zone in Louisville. Cody wanted to find his parents. Loretta wanted to open another diner. Kyle wanted to honor Rachel's memory by living a life worth living. Marcus took the last watch before dawn, looking out over the ruined city. Nashville had been a good town, music, food, friendly people. Now it was a tomb, but maybe that wasn't the end. Maybe somewhere out there, people were rebuilding, fighting back, reclaiming what they'd lost. The radio crackled, and Harrison's voice came through. All positions, this is command. Convoy ETA is 6 hours. They'll be coming up Broadway, and they're bringing enough firepower to punch through the geek horde. Our job is to be ready to move when they arrive. Pack light, stay alert, and get ready to run like hell. 6 hours. They'd survived 6 days of hell, and now they were down to 6 hours. Marcus checked his rifle, made sure his pack was ready, and waited for the dawn. When it came, the sun rose over Nashville one more time, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that were almost beautiful enough to forget the nightmare below. The survivors gathered their meager belongings, said goodbye to the rooftop that had sheltered them, and prepared for the final push. The convoy arrived right on schedule, 5 heavily armored trucks, 2 Humvees with mounted guns, and enough soldiers to actually make Marcus believe they might win this fight. The vehicles carved through the zombie horde like a hot knife through butter, and soldiers on the ground created a perimeter, dropping geeks with the kind of efficiency that came from practice. Go! 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 Harrison shouted, and they ran. Down the fire escape, across the alley, into the street where soldiers were waving them toward the trucks. Marcus ran harder than he'd ever run in his life, with Jamie beside him and Kyle ahead and all the others racing for salvation. A zombie lunged at Cody, but Dakota's crossbow bolt took it down before it could connect. Loretta stumbled, and Owen caught her, half carrying her the last few yards. They piled into the trucks, soldiers laying down covering fire, and then the convoy was moving, pushing through the dead city toward the highway and freedom beyond. Marcus looked back once, watching Nashville disappear behind them, and felt something break loose in his chest, grief, relief, and exhaustion so profound it seemed to reach his soul. They'd made it. Against all odds, through hell and horror, they'd survived. Where to now? Jamie asked, her head resting on Marcus's shoulder. Louisville, he said. Then we figure out the rest. One day at a time, one step at a time. We survive, and we keep surviving until this nightmare ends. And if it doesn't end? Kyle asked quietly. Marcus thought about Melissa Hoffman, about Rachel, about all the people who didn't make it. He thought about the strength it took to keep going when everything was falling apart, about the courage of ordinary people facing extraordinary darkness. Then we make a new world, he said finally. Whatever it takes, for as long as it takes. We don't give up, we don't give in, and we don't let the darkness win. That's the deal. That's how we honor the folks we lost. The truck rolled on through the Tennessee countryside, carrying its precious cargo of survivors toward whatever came next. Behind them, the dead city groaned and shuffled, but ahead there was hope, fragile and hard-won, but real. And for now, in this moment, that was enough. They'd survived beyond the edge of darkness, and they'd keep surviving, one heartbeat, one breath, one day at a time. Because that's what humans did. They endured. They adapted. They fought. And when the world tried to break them, they found strength in each other and refused to stay broken. The story of Nashville was over, but their story, the story of Marcus and Jamie and Kyle and all the brave hearts who'd faced the nightmare and lived, that story was just beginning.